the symbolism with this episode of Owarimonogatari. Yo, GOAT NISIO ISIN Sensei, base shaft. So many pieces of the puzzle are starting to fall into place for me as far as my Ogie theory crafting is concerned. And we're going to dive into that heavy and you know, look at the new markers that we get in this episode that are even furthering, you know, the kinds of thoughts that I'm having surrounding Ogie's character and the theories that I've previously crafted, and how things are going to start to tie into how Ogie has been behind the scenes and manipulating events throughout second season. But the symbolism in this episode, especially with that ending and the resolution for this arc Sodachi lost, the feels for the character of Sodachi that I have right now, and just the dark resolution of everything, to be completely honest. And the concept of darkness is something I need to get into heavy with this review, because it's something that is starting to weigh on me. And hardcore Monogatari fans who remember in particular Shinobu time very well, and we're about to get into the Shinobu male greatness, yo, let's go, but I'll talk about that in a second. But if you remember, you know, the world of oddities and of Kai and apparitions that well, and you're a hardcore Monogatari fan, you know where I'm going to be going with this. And I'm starting to see some ties between this. It's not even just as simple as the theory I have right now, which, you know, Ogie being an apparition birthed from Araragi's subconscious, which I still believe that to be wholeheartedly true, and the events and the way that, you know, from Ogie formula to the end of Sodachi Lost, and the entirety of Owarimonogatari is broken down. Each episode, I've just seen new markers and signs that just, it's unavoidable. The subtleties and the things that I see surrounding and what they do episode after episode, it has firmly solidified my beliefs as to Ogie's origins, but there might even be more to it. And I still have yet to place my finger on her ultimate endgame, even though I've been theory crafting about that, you know, the whole traffic lights discussion that I went into and everything. But we're going to get back into that. Before we get into anything heavy with this episode and the revelations, which I called it last week, dude. I straight up called it. Yes, I did throw out 3 theories as to what could have happened with Ogie's mother, but my main one is in fact exactly what transpired, dude, and it's so twisted and so warped and sad, and then the exchange between Hanakawa and Ogie, something I really want to jump into first. But first things first, the first thing I have to absolutely mention with this episode on a more lighthearted note were those Gahara-san text messages, because you already know Gahara-san is my goddess, man, and those text messages are gold. Like, sometimes, let's be real, Araragi is very high in the order of the 10 Grand Kings of harem. He is. I'm not going to tell you his exact place, but let's just say he's in the top 5. And I've always been jealous of the man's harem, because so many of these girls I absolutely love. Like, they're some of my favorite female characters in all of literature to begin with. And to see you know, I've always been a little bit jealous of Araragi, but when I read stuff like this, when I see things like this, I'm just like, yo, dog, you don't even deserve all this right now, man. But those Gahara-san text messages were good. I have to say that much. And we also get, you know, the information that Sodachi did, in fact, go to Senju Gahara and apologize and everything like that, which just, with every little bit of subtlety with this episode, the resolution to the build-up for Sodachi's character and everything that's been transpiring for Owarimonogatari up to this point, as far as Ogie and Sodachi are both concerned, were tied up beautifully to wrap up the first part of this course. So we're gonna dive into the first things that I need to talk about. 2 key pieces of symbolism with this episode that I was just like, oh, this is insane. This is great. This is what I love about this series so wholeheartedly. And the dialogue, what Shaft does with the cinematography and everything aside, these 2 pieces inherently crafted by Nisio Sensei were amazing. First of all, the envelope that was left for Araragi at the end of this. The weight that has, especially going back to the fact that she left this empty envelope for him before when they were in middle school, and he never fully understood why it was empty and why she never said goodbye, and why you know, until all of this came together and the revelations concerning her mother, and Araragi actually having a hand in having her face this. But to see the fact, and they don't actually reveal Nisio, and I went and looked into it, and it's not revealed in light novel either, but we don't know exactly what was written in that envelope. And personally, I believe that there was nothing written. All that, the significance I find in that, and why I think the symbolism is so deep, is because he notes that there is in fact paper inside this envelope, as opposed to the empty one that was left for him previously. And I think that just serves to showcase, the discrepancy between then and now, and the resolution, and Sodachi finally, forgiving Araragi and kind of showing witness, even though there was nothing probably written on the envelope, and that's why he laughs in that way, and that's what I truly believe. It symbolizes that this time she's leaving something for him. The envelope is no longer empty. It showcases that in the past he couldn't actually save her and he couldn't help her, and she felt empty, and she felt as though nobody actually saw her and there was nothing she could do. And this time she genuinely is appreciative to what Araragi has done for her, and just by leaving the filled envelope, I think that's heavy. And then the second piece of symbolism that I really liked was the scene after Ogie was going. Like, I already told you, Ogie, I know your endgame, I know your final boss and everything like that, but don't test the tiger, man. You're straight up fondling my girl Hanakawa, dude. I was just like, yo, talking about you enticed him with those lumps of meat on your chest and telling Araragi to basically denounce her and to be like, oh, Ogie, you're the only one that I love. I was just like, yo, this is some shit. Ogie took it to a new level with the fiend mode that she's been on. She has been more subtle about it, and that's generally just when, Araragi and her are alone, because, to be honest, every encounter with Hanakawa thus far has been highly antagonistic, to the point where even the dialogue, I've never seen my girl this flustered. It's been a long time since the fact that Hanakawa couldn't even speak, and that she had to get up, and I do believe that her washing out the dye symbolizes something even deeper, because Ogie is always was talking about heavily in this dialogue about, Hanakawa in her prime, and how she's fallen off, and how she has nothing to offer, etc., etc. And it showcases Hanakawa, no longer hiding anything, no longer holding anything back, and kind of being 100% of herself, restoring herself to her prime in a sense. But at the same time, I think that she went and washed herself and to cool her head down, simply because she was that flustered by Ogie's demeanor and her words and everything that she was saying to him. And I also think that Ogie fondling Hanakawa has a little bit more symbolism than just, Araragi's fantasy, because if you go with my theory that Ogie's in fact, an apparition generated from Araragi's subconscious, Ogie's basically filling that role, because we knew Araragi was going to do it. And then it leads me into the endgame discussion that I want to get into with this episode, but it's almost as if Ogie, and it takes me back to those words that she said in Sadachi Riddle a couple episodes ago, where she was like, Aragi's like, I still despise myself a little bit, and she's like, that little bit is how much I love you. That, coupled with the traffic light symbolism, and what she basically said in their very first encounter that we saw in second season, where, they had this dialogue before Mayo Jingaishi, and she was basically telling him that perhaps I exist to remind people how dark and destitute and how much despair actually exists in this world, dude. And putting it together, seeing the dialogue at the end of this episode, which I want to dive into now, I'm just like, yo, it might even go even further into the grander concepts of the Monogatari universe. And at that point, I know my boy Meme, and of course Gain, who knows everything, has to be aware and privy to the final boss's movements, if that's the case. So I'm going to dive into that in a second, but that scene between Hanakawa, it's basically round 2, Ogie versus Hanakawa. Ogie was going in, but my girl doesn't back down. And once they went into the revelations, giving the hints, and I can't believe it took Araragi to like hint 30 some shit. I didn't even know how far they went into it before he finally stopped them, because I had called it before we even got there. I called it last week. And I want to know where you guys, at what point during the hints did you put it together finally? Because my two main theories were either Sadachi was insane and she killed her mother and then completely blocked it out, or her mother died, which actually unfolded. Her mother died there, completely deteriorated, and because of the garbage and the trash and everything, nobody ever really noticed. And to see how warped that is, dude. And I completely knew my shit was solidified once hint number 2, when Hanakawa is basically like, yo, remember the way that you perceived her original mansion, or you thought it was all broken down, and it's all a matter of perception. I'm just like, yo, to think that Sadachi had been caring for her dead mother for probably, 2 years almost. Her mother had been dead, sitting there in that room just rotting away, and at that point she just registered it as her mother stopped eating. That is completely twisted and warped, and Sadachi inherently is broken because of her past and this experience, but I see her slowly piecing, building back together. And as the ending of this episode, even Ogie and Hanakawa both say, respectively, that she has this clean slate now. She can finally move forward with her life. And though I felt as though it was kind of almost as though she always knew deep down inside, and that's why she was so ready to accept it when Araragi told this to her, to see that smile on her face and to see her be able to move forward after all of this, I'm just like, yo, the revelations with this arc, the heavy feels with Sodachi's character in last week's episode and everything like that. Fucking MARINA, I know I dude, which, yo, straight up, Ogie yet again breaking the fourth wall, and she says this in this episode, she was so well cast, too. And I'm like, yo, first, on one hand, that definitely serves the shout out to fucking MARINA, I know, and that incredible performance from last week and everything like that. But you have to keep in mind that these words were definitely part of the original dialogue in the light novel, and NISIO crafted them himself. And then keeping that in, kind of the meta sense of Monogatari ever since Tadatsuru's character was introduced in Tsuki, and kind of the whole final boss mentality that was instilled back then, and how there was this puppeteer behind the strings and everything like that, which is what got me onto Ogie back during Tsuki, and finally starting to put things together as far as her being final boss and endgame material. Seeing this now and seeing those words yet again just solidifies that 100%. And then on top of that, dude, it kind of, referring back to Tadatsu's words and pulling, the strings behind the scenes and being this puppeteer, which I'm finally starting to see how the pieces fit into place in terms of the entirety of second season and every hand that Ogie had to play in her role and everything. So, first of all, let's look at some of the end dialogue where she basically concedes to Araragi at the end of this episode and is like, I've lost this time. And in the way the dialogue is structured, and Aragi's still not 100% wary of Ogie as someone like Hanakawa is at this stage, which I'll talk about that last, but to see that dialogue and the way it unfolds, she's not even subtle about the fact that she's final boss at this point. If people still can't see it, I can't really help them. But anyway, first of all, she admits, because Araragi straight up asked her, he said, I don't know, he's curious. He's like, where are you from? Where is your home near here? Why did you come here to begin with? And she says, I've been looking for a lost child, which clearly refers to Hachikuji. And she says, that was my original starting point. Now, if you think about where this is in the timeline, which the end of Sodachi Lost takes place right before Nadeko Medusa. And I believe that this is right before, Ogie goes and sets up and orchestrates the events to lead Nadeko into becoming, the snake goddess and everything like that. But before that transplant, and I saw that link to it, and when Ogie started to formulate this scheme, back when she was standing in front of the locker at the middle school a couple episodes back to begin with in Tadachi Riddle. So, that on top of it, to see her referring to Hachikuji and everything like that, plus every piece of evidence that I've gathered up to this point, and the kind of movements that she's been making, and how the dialogue that she says here, where she's basically like, the objective of seeing how you behave with your childhood friends has been met. So as far as balancing goes, I think it was perfect for me to lose here. This kind of confirming that she has everything in place and everything she needs to influence the events of Nadeko Medusa and Hitagiya, respectively, and the movements that she makes there, and that we already know that she had her hands in before even going to Tsuki and what transpired with Tadatsu. That shit is crazy, and that shit is crazy. But then trying to, hone in on the endgame even further, these final words that she says to Araragi is the biggest piece of evidence for me with this episode, and tying into what I know is coming. So we're going to talk about that. Please be careful, Araragi-senpai. It might not go this well next time. No one knows what the future holds, because it's as dark as the streets at night, yo. See, the darkness here, the use of the word dark and yami, and the very idea that, the streets at night and the whole concept of safety, the traffic light symbolism, and what took place in that first dialogue that I referenced when I was trying to first put my finger on Ogie's endgame, and how she was basically like, I believe I exist, ultimately is what her words boil down to, in order to reveal to people and remind them of how dark this world truly is, right? And then thinking about the events of Shinobu time. We're about to go into Shinobu Mail, which I need to end off talking about, but thinking about the events of Shinobu time and the black orb and everything. I was speculating as to this, earlier on, back during Sadachi Riddle, when I was theory crafting about Ogie, and thinking about that, the concept of the darkness that governs all Kai, all oddities and everything like that, and what eventually happens to everybody's girl, Hachikuji, dude, fucking Mayo greatness, and I can't wait to see her in Mayo, hell, but I digress. I digress. Thinking about that concept, what if Ogie has ties to the darkness then? And is almost a medium of it that, while yes, it could very well be that she was created from Aragi's subconscious, but there must be some sort of link here, and that may very well be, you know, in line with her endgame, you know, the kind of rules that governed the, you know, oddies and how the darkness operated, you know, peering through lies and trying to destroy, you know, the very fabric and generation of certain oddies, like, you know, what everything that transpired with My Best Girl Kiss Shot, you know, the events of Shinobu Time and whatnot. What if Ogie has a connection to the darkness? And then knowing that the final arc of Owari is called Ogie Dark, plus, you know, the whole traffic light symbolism, this kind of idea of light and dark, of justice, morality, and everything like that, and the danger and security of the world, I'm wondering if it's not only that she is an apparition generated from Aragi, but on top of that has some link to the darkness. And if that is the case, then my boy Mei definitely knows about her, and the very fact that he's not here, which I've always speculated, has some link to that, and he's clearly making moves on his part, as with Gain, because Gain claims to know everything, and I'm interested to see how that goes as well. So that's where things stand with me right now as far as the Ogie theory crafting and the endgame and how things are going to unfold. But to keep it, please nobody spoil me, because to clarify what I know going forward with the series, I only know the brief summaries of each arc of Owari. That's all I know. I know that going into Shinobu Mail, which is going to be hype, we're finally going to get to see the events that transpired, you know, with Aragi and Shinobu, and that request that Gain sent in, you know, during the same time that the events of Tsubasa, you know, Tiger were unfolding. And when I remember that scene, it's so iconic for me, at the end of Tsubasa Tiger, where Aragi shows up at the end with, you know, Kokowatari in hand. He just looks like a badass, and I was always wondering where the fuck he was the entire time, dude. And we're finally going to get those revelations, so I'm hyped to get into this arc, and the fact that it's going to focus around my best girl Shinobu, dude. I'm ready. I'm so ready to finally see her back and dive into it, because yes, Shinobu is one of my favorite girls in the entire series. Top 3 easily, best girl. Just I absolutely love Kiss Shot. So I can't wait for that, right? But then I know that in the final core, which we're not going to, Shinobu Mail is going to be the end of this core. In the final core, when they adapt that, we're going to get the final 3 arcs, which I know the names, Mayoe Hell, and I know that we get to see Mayo again, and that's all I know. I don't know exactly what unfolds. Then I know we have Hitage Rendezvous, where, you know, Aragi go and Sejigahara go on this date, and then the final revelations with Ogie and Ogie Dark. And I think that this concept of darkness definitely has a much greater hand to play in the events of the series. And then finally, last thing I want to do before I end this video is the fact that I always wondered, because remember during Hitagi End, Tsubasa was already traveling and clearly looking for Mei. And I was always like, yo, what is the urgency of finding Mei right now? And we never really got that revelation, but it makes so much more sense seeing the setup and the interactions and how deeply it worries Hanakawa of Ogie's existence, because her words where he's like, oh, Aragi's like, you know, if you actually run into Mei, you know, let him know that I met his niece. And she's like, oh, don't worry, I'll definitely be telling him about that. The whole purpose for this trip, despite what she says to Aragi, is to locate Mei, because she believes that Ogie is that much of a threat, and that maybe Mei is probably the only one, that, as far as she knows, that can potentially help them and kind of reveal what's going on with Ogie and what Ogie truly is. So just seeing the setup and how everything is tying into the build-up and things surrounding Ogie and how she was operating behind the scenes in second season, and finally getting the piece of the puzzle coming into place with these first 3 arcs of Owari under our belt, I really need to get that. It's going to be like my 5th rewatch of second season, but I need to get that second season rewatch in so I can solidify my theories and make sure everything lines up, because in terms of how we're going into the timeline now, these events, the end of Sodachi Lost, like I said, takes place right before Nadeko Medusa. Beforehand, Ogie Formula is after Shinobu Mail. So we're jumping, you know, back in time to right after Shinobu time and before Ogie Formula takes place. So that's pretty much what's going to be happening. I can't wait to dive into this arc. I know it's going to be my favorite arc of Owari so far, dude, because it's the greatest, the fucking greatest. But let me know your thoughts on this final episode of Sodachi Lost, dude. Just how dark and twisted the revelation was of what happened in Sodachi's past, and seeing this character. She was an absolutely amazing character, dude. It's a shame that she's not going to, you know, be around and be a part of the harm, but ultimately, I think that everything then, and the pieces of this arc and the revelations, everything fell into place beautifully, and it was an incredible resolution. So let me know your thoughts on this last episode of Sodachi Lost, and I'm out. Peace.